Welcome, everyone. This meeting of the Tennessee Higher Education Commission is called to order. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We're first going to call roll, and we are so lucky because we can do the voice vote or voice call today, so as opposed to having to go individual. So I will actually pass it on to you, Madam Secretary.
Chairwoman Scarlett,
Here?
Commissioner Allman,
Here.
Commissioner Matlock, Commissioner Perry,
Here.
Commissioner Rader,
Here.
Commissioner Ragsdale,
Here.
Commissioner Stafford,
Present.
Commissioner Van Epps,
Here.
Commissioner Wood,
Here.
Secretary Hargett,
Here.
Treasurer Lillard,
Here.
Commissioner Morrison,
Nathan James here.
Comptroller Mumpower.
Here.
Chairwoman, you have 12 members present and 11 voting members present.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Our first agenda item is to adopt the agenda for today's meeting. I propose that we amend the agenda as follows. We move the system report to immediately following the chair's report, if that's okay, and bump the consent calendar item to be the first item on the regular calendar following a conversation in the Access, Academics, and Student Success Committee. We just want to learn a little bit more about the post-state authorization. Thought it'd be a good information piece for everyone to hear. And then we also, on the regular calendar, item 4 to transmission the 2024-2025 proposed operating budgets. With no questions or objections, I'll entertain a motion and a second to adopt the agenda as mentioned.
So moved.
With no objection, we'll take roll call vote. Nope, voice vote, we just said that. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next item is public comment. Dr. Gentile.
Chairwoman, there's been no public comment request.
Okay, thank you. First up, we have the approval of the minutes. No questions or objections. I will entertain a motion and a second for the minutes from May 16th, 2024.
Second.
With no objection, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Well, thank you all for being here today. Big thanks to Chancellor Tidings and for TBR for hosting the THEC meeting here today and also our committee meetings yesterday. Thank you very much. I do want to give a thanks. We have a lot of new faces sitting up here. I want to give a special thanks to Mayor A.C. Wharton, Dakasha Winton, Pam Coben, Evan Cope for their service, and Jay Moser, may he rest in peace. They've provided years of support for this commission and great voices. I do want to welcome our 5 new members. First, we have Will Perry from Memphis. Commissioner Perry is a lawyer with Butler Snow, a former Chancery Court judge, taught 8th grade after graduating from Wake Forest University as an adjunct professor at the University of Memphis Law School. Thank you and welcome. Charles Wood from Chattanooga. Commissioner Wood has served as the president and CEO of the Chattanooga Chamber of Commerce since 2023, and prior to that, he was the vice president of economic and talent development. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Next up, we have Mike Ragsdale. Mayor Ragsdale began his career at Pellissippi State Community College in admissions and later became the Dean of Administrative Affairs. From 2002 to 2010, he served 2 terms as Knox County Mayor, where he helped launch Knox Achieves, which eventually transitioned into Tennessee Achieves, which we all know about, and he also sits on the board. So thank you for being here, Mayor. John Rader, where are you, John? There you are. Commissioner Rader served as Deputy Counsel to Governor Haslam from 2011 to 2015, before serving as counsel for the Senate Foreign Relations Committee under Chairman Bob Corker, and most recently, as Chief of Staff for Senator Bill Hagerty. He now serves as a visiting fellow at the Hoover Institution, a partner at Affinity Partners Global, and senior counselor at Palantir Technologies. We've got a lot going on, so thank you and welcome. Last but not least, Matt Van Epps from Nashville. Commissioner Van Epps previously served in the Lee administration as Deputy Operating Officer, and prior to that with the Department of Transportation. In 2023, he left state government to be Senior Vice President of Operations at Main Street Health and now consults with BHA Strategy. A West Point graduate, Commissioner Van Epps served the U.S. Army from 2007 to 2015 and currently serves the Tennessee National Guard. Thank you for service. I also think probably probably one of the more important roles he has is relatively new. He's a dad to a new baby girl, only a month old as of today. So congratulations. We are still lacking a student representative on the commission. We hope to have that spot filled by our next meeting in November. You all have gone through some really intensive onboarding. I do remember it. There's a lot of information that was given to you, in some cases thrown at you, because it's a lot of information. But as you know, THEC is a coordinating commission providing guidance to our 7 Tennessee universities and the Tennessee Board of Regents, who oversees the community colleges and colleges of applied technology. THEC also facilitates financial support for students and implements the outcomes-based funding formula. I think we've all agreed that focusing on the student experience is crucial, as it promotes access to and completion of post-secondary degrees, landing in high-growth career opportunities. This ensures students can fully realize the value of their education and by stepping into the jobs of today and tomorrow. In the next 8 to 10 years, areas like manufacturing and construction and healthcare, transportation, computer, and mathematical occupations will open more than 200,000 jobs in Tennessee. As a state, continuing to focus on career pathways for K-12, but also for adults, is imperative for students to access that high-quality credentials that our employers are seeking. Today, Director Jen Tile will provide us an update on the schedule for the 2025 THEC Master Plan. This plan, will developed in collaboration with the institutions, will aim to guide the Tennessee higher education ecosystem towards an even stronger future. Before we get into the agenda, I'd like to recognize Chancellor Tidings as our host to share some thoughts. And while she's coming up to the podium, I don't know how many of you guys get the Nashville Post, since we're all from all over the state, but TBR, specifically Motlow State and Nashville State, were called out for a couple of programs tied to mining talent and AI and other advanced work. But Michael Torrance from Motlow State has a lot to say in here, and specifically he's partnering with 120 different businesses in the work that he's doing at Motlow State. And then also at Nashville State Community College, they're partnered with Tractor Supply Company, and they have been partnered for a while, where students get to work at Tractor Supply while also going to school. And there's recently a Google announcement too. So there's a lot of great things happening at TBR. We appreciate you welcoming us to your boardroom here.
Absolutely, and we are honored. Oh, sorry about that. We're honored to have all of you here today visiting in our boardroom, and it is my pleasure to give you a brief update on the Tennessee Board of Regents and the things that we've been up to since you were here last year. For those of you that are new to the board, I am going to do just a little bit of our foundational talk, and that is our mission statement. And it's very easy to remember because it is student success and workforce development. It's built on the pillars that you see here of open access, completion, and community and workforce development. This past year, we issued 11,598 associate degrees, 3,083 community college certificates were awarded, 7,677 diplomas at our technical colleges, with a 76% completion rate, an 86% job placement rate, and a 95% licensure exam pass rate. And if you'll recall, that licensure pass rate is for any state or national exam that is required for a program to pass before they can go to work in the field. We have a 95% pass rate. I will share with you that most of the states in the nation have a 70% pass rate. So extremely proud of the work that's happening at our colleges and the jobs that our students are able to get. This past year, we served 185,000 plus students in both our academic and our workforce programs. That was a 4% increase at our community colleges and a 50% increase in our dual enrollment. We're extremely proud and thankful to the legislators and the governor's office for the increase in the dual enrollment funding that has happened over the last several years, and that's the reason that you see a 50% increase in those numbers. We are also an open access institution or system, meaning we take everybody that walks through the door, and that does present challenges of its own. 67% of our student body is in the low income bracket, and 50% of our student body had an ACT score of below 19. We have opportunities in place to help those students. It's a large part of what we do to help them be successful, but I just always like to point that out, that from the day they walk in the door, many of them are walking in with challenges that are difficult to overcome. In addressing those challenges, we do have some of the things that you see listed here: emergency grants for students, learning support innovations that we've been working on for 10 years, and our Tennessee Coaching Project, again, to help students directly to stay in school and to be successful in college. Strategic enrollment management is another area that we've been working diligently in. We've been deploying our new tools in that area. We have been restructuring in TBR, and we now have a division that is directly over our strategic enrollment management, and I'm really happy to announce today that we did steal a former THEC employee, and that is Mr. Troy Grant, who is with us today. We'll be starting with TBR in September, so we're very proud to have him heading up this new initiative for our system. We are also going to be working more heavily with our university partners over the next year, again, to make sure that we are streamlining that opportunity for students. 40% of our students that come into our colleges enter as transfer students. That's their goal. When they walk in the door, what they plan to do is transfer to a university. We want to make sure that we are making that a seamless process. So over the next year, we're going to be very diligently working with our community partners, our university partners, to do everything we can to make that as seamless as possible for students when they do transfer. We have also been, for the last 2 years, doing what we called reimagining the community college experience. As many of you that went to college right out of high school, when you signed up for those first courses in college, probably your schedule said psychology, history, English, and math. And I would put money that each and every one of you had that schedule, your very first term in college. What we've realized over the years is that when you've got a student that comes in and their goal is to become a nurse, signing up for English, psychology, math, and history doesn't really excite them. We are trying to, what we call, flip that experience for students so that when they enter with us, they begin to get a taste of the program they have actually signed up to go into. We're still teaching English, psychology, history, and math, but we are embedding it more into our program of study. We're moving it further into the program. And we've also realized that if we lose a student in that first year, our goal is that they now have some sort of certificate in their hand so that their time with us has built upon their knowledge set and they can go to work. So we are working closely with our colleges, exploring those career paths, building the career-ready skills, and building those stackable credentials so that students can be successful in smaller bites. They can actually have something if they don't make it to year 2. They can continue to build and have a degree available to them, but each process leads one into the other. This past year, we did 1.6 million hours in workforce training. Now, that is over and above our 4-credit training. This is the work that we do with business and industry across the state of Tennessee, working with all of the companies to either help them retool individuals that already work for them or bring on new individuals that need training for their company. That is the most we have ever done, and we are extremely proud of that number. We have also been working on the delivery of our workforce system to integrate more closely the continuing education workforce development piece with our academic piece, so that if a student is taking courses for a company, when they get that piece of training, it also can filter into a 4-credit piece of training, and they can continue their education if that's what they desire. So we've completely revamped the process and the way that we work internally for that to happen for our students. Tara mentioned the Google event. This did just happen 2 weeks ago. We're very excited that we were able to sign this statewide agreement with Google. We have been doing a pilot phase with Motlow and Nashville State over the last year, Motlow and Chattanooga State. Over the last year, we've had graduates from that program. One of our graduates spoke at this event, and it was so wonderful to hear her tell her story and how she had been working as a parapro in a school system when this Google opportunity was presented to her. And she said she took a leap of faith. She quit her job. She got this degree. And for the very first time, she had just signed an agreement to buy a home when she was presenting to us. So the opportunity that this provided to her was huge. It changed her life, and it changed her family's life in a year. So exciting work that's going on there. This will be offered at all 13 of our community colleges beginning this year. We're also pretty proud of the convening that we had this past year with multi-agency workforce constituents across the state. We represented every major industry in the state of Tennessee. They came together at Volunteer State. We ran a charrette to find out what was on their mind. We needed to hear from industry. Are we doing our job? Are we turning students out with the skill sets that you need? And if we're not, tell us, please, now, what we need to be doing differently. All of you will recall, you've heard me say it many times, that we warranty our graduates. If a student, when they graduate from one of our programs, if within 1 year, an employer says, well, they really can't do what you said you trained them to do, we will take them back and retrain them for free. We've had 0 claims still to date. In order for that to continue, we need to make sure that we're still hearing from business and industry. The governor came, he addressed the group, he talked about the value of the degrees that our students were receiving, and he encouraged the group to be honest and open with us. We got great feedback. We got some areas where we are going to strengthen some things that we're doing, but again, it's that partnership with industry that allows us to be successful for our students. I also wanted to talk about a partnership that we have developed with the Department of Labor. We are now able to get the statistics directly from the Department of Labor. In the past, there was always a huge years of lag time in that data. So when our graduates were out in the field working, we were never really sure of how they were progressing in their field of study, because by the time we got the information, it was really outdated. This new process and this new agreement that we've signed with labor is taking that data and feeding it directly into our structure now, into our system, so that we have real-time updates on what these income levels and career clusters look like. What I have on the slide now is 5 years after college graduation, and then we now are able to take that out to 10 years after graduation. And you can see that students start out, the blue bars are the graduates, the red bars are people that might have taken a course or two with us but did not graduate from a program of study. And while having some coursework helps them, they are still above the median or the low average part of the workforce. You can see that graduates do so much better. And this is what we try to show students. Look at the difference in what your earning potential is if you stay with us and you complete this program of study. Again, this is brand new. We understand we are the only state in the nation that is able to directly do this. Also, with a partnership that labor has now signed nationally, we're going to be able to follow students that leave the state of Tennessee as well. Right now, we only have internal to the state data, but we plan to be able to stretch this out to students that do come and train with us and now actually leave the state. So we'll be able to share that information with you. Our TCAP master plan, again, I don't think there are many of you at this table that didn't know that we got $1 billion in the budget a year ago. That completely wiped out our TCAP master plan. It put every single project that we had in the plan in play. I am so proud to tell you that today We are still on time and on budget, and every one of those projects are under design and contract at this moment in time. Remember, we got that money July 1st. So it's a miracle that we are at that point, and I could not say enough great things about our facilities department and the work that they do to make this happen. Anytime you want to go up and visit the War Room, it's still up there. I think some of you saw it earlier, but it is there, and Jeff Holmes and Dick Tracy are just knocking it out of the ballpark. All of these projects are being designed with program flexibility, future expansion, and lower maintenance cost involved in them. And it's really important for me to say this because the reason that we are having to do this major master plan overhaul is, if you'll recall, many of our buildings, when the technical college system first started, they were under the high school system. So most of these buildings were built like a high school or a middle school. They were cinder block buildings and were built about 60 years ago for the majority of them. It is really difficult to retrofit a cinder block building to the needs of today's students. And so our goal now is to build a building that in 60 years somebody is not saying, what was wrong with that person that was in charge of TBR 60 years ago? What were they thinking? We want them to have a building that they can morph into whatever industry they're needing to train for. And it also gives us that flexibility because we do, as I say quite often, have to stay on the bleeding edge of technology. We have to be able to train for what people are using in the industry. Or else our students won't pass that warranty test when they get into the industry. The new TCAT at Stanton, we did have our grand opening on this building. This is what we call the Blue Oval City Ford building that was appropriated when Ford announced that they were coming to Tennessee. We have begun to train for Ford in this building and for SK. The training started before we actually did the ribbon cutting, and beginning in fall term, Dyersburg State will also be offering classes in this new facility. If you have not seen it, please put it on your schedule to stop by any time. The director of that school is Patrick Davis, and he would be happy to give you a tour at any time. It is a fantastic, beautiful partnership between Ford and the opportunities that are going to be available to students here is game-changing for West Tennessee. And that's all I have to share with you today. There is a lot more happening, but I was told I could not stand up here all morning and that I needed to keep it brief. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. And once again, we're just really glad and proud to have you here in our building today.
Thank you so much, Chancellor. Anyone have any questions? Yes, Nathan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, first of all, I want to say a public thanks to Dr. Davis. You may know that they've been kind enough at TCAT Stanton. They'll be hosting our not tomorrow's State Board of Education meeting, but our November meeting, and we're very much looking forward to that. Thanks also for allowing us to be part of the ribbon cutting ceremony there. I did want to ask. In terms of one of the unique things that you all offer, and recognizing that transfer is at the heart of what you do with the community colleges, what do you think the barriers are to making the reverse transfer process automatic rather than, is that a process that maybe as students they're going to the university, as I used to be adjunct at Vol State, so I love the TBR system, absolutely do. Is there a process in place that allows or informs the students as they go that they do qualify for the reverse transfer when that time comes at their university?
Now, I want to thank you for loving TBR, and I do want to make sure that I'm understanding correctly that what you're talking about with reverse transfer. We do have students that have university courses and will take university courses that have not graduated from one of our colleges. Our university partners are incredible about working with us. If the student, we cannot do it automatically. We do have to get permission from the student to give them a degree, which has always seemed strange to me. You think they'd all want it.
Right.
Some don't. But then we work with the university to do just that, to give the reverse credit so that they can actually get that associate degree while they're finishing their bachelor's degree. The process works, but it is a very manual and tedious process at the moment. It is a hope for our system and working with our university partners that we can make that more automatic.
Yeah.
We have, I didn't go into any detail about the CRM and the work that we're doing with Slate and putting these processes in that are going to give us more information with regard to those students, but that is part of this reimagining work that we're doing as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions from the commissioners? Thank you very much, Chancellor. I really appreciate it. At this time, we're going to turn to Dr. Stephen Gentile for his Executive Director's report. Dr. Gentile, you are recognized.
All right, good morning, everyone. So many new faces here, so many other faces out in the crowd today. I want to take a moment to recognize the amount of presidents that we have in the room today visiting with us. We have, and by the way, Commissioner Stafford was laughing at me for frantically writing this down as I saw people walk in. But I want to recognize Dr. Ron Johnson, interim president of Tennessee State University, here in the front row. You'll hear later from President Licari of Austin Peay State University and President Chris Whaley of Roane State Community College as well. We have Chancellor Dondi Plowman from UT Knoxville, Chancellor Linda Martin from UT Southern. We have President Bill Hardgrave from University of Memphis. You heard from Chancellor Flora Tidings and, of course, President Randy Boyd from University of Tennessee. And I'm sure I'm forgetting someone, and I apologize for that. But we also have in the audience, I want to take a moment to recognize him, Claude Presnell, president of THEC, and a force for higher education in Tennessee and a force for higher education in the nation. When I learned I was going to be interim president about a year ago now, one of the first meetings I had was with Claude Presnell, eager to soak up all the wisdom and knowledge he had, looking forward to working with him in this new capacity. And at that lunch, he also told me his time would be short with THEC as he wants to travel the world himself and take a step back away from his role at THEC. However, he'll be nearby the whole time, and I've got his cell phone number, and I will call him all the time, perhaps. But Claude entered higher education as a first-generation student, a Pell recipient. He, like others in this room, started off in admission financial aid, and has grown to be an expert in the nation, serving in many different capacities at the federal level and the state level, serving on the THEC board on our organization for the last 28 years. He's a fierce advocate for Tennesseans, for private institutions, for public institutions as well. I just want to take a moment to recognize Claude. Thank you, sir. He and I and Dr. Cameron Kahn, the new incoming THEC president, will be meeting on the 1st of September with our staff and looking forward to recognizing her at our future commission meeting. She's a native of Dyersburg, Tennessee, and is currently at the Baptist Health Science Center. We look forward to working with her in the future. As always, I want to recognize new staff, and we have a couple in the room with us today. If you can stand when I call your name. We have Anthony Fisher, who's working in THEC, quality analyst. It's his birthday today, by the way. Happy birthday to him. Jasmine Jong, a PPR analyst. Kayla Joyner, an accountant. Nomi Sanchez, working in administration. William Backham, our THEC software developer. And here in the audience, this first one we lovingly stole from TBR, Northeast State, specifically, Tongai Mautza. Sorry, sir. There you go. Welcome. And we also have Megan Roberts, Director of Academic Affairs, who comes to us from East Tennessee State University as well. Thank you. Other staff movements I want to recognize. I've long had a focus on our internal operations, making sure that we are moving along and improving and continuously improving on all of our operations internal. And I have named Scott Sloan, in addition to being General Counsel, our Chief Operating Officer within THEC. So thank you, sir. Now, lots of new faces around the table. I want to take a moment to recognize you and thank you over the last couple of months, having met with you during orientation, having really good phone calls, and what you do for higher education in Tennessee is going to be transformative. Specifically for me, however, what you'll do for me and my staff and those who come after us, as you help guide us and probe us and push us in the direction that we need to go to best meet the needs of Tennesseans and students, institutions, and state stakeholders. So I want to welcome you here today. I also want to transform and move us into a direction where we properly recognize those who've served on our commission in the past. I have the privilege of serving as a regent, the Tennessee Board of Regents, and they do such a really good job of recognizing those who've served on their board, and I think it's important to do so with our commissioners. So today, I would like to recognize all those who formally just stepped off the board. We have one here in attendance with us, and I'll talk about how we'll recognize a couple of others down the road. But I want to take a moment here to recognize Pam Coben. Pam, she's been on the board. She started on the board about a month before I started working as a fiscal analyst. And she is a tireless advocate for doing better, for improving our relationships with our state stakeholders. About a year ago, when I met with her in this new capacity, her biggest concern was what she saw as a growing rift between us, THEC, staff, commission, and institutions. And she said to me, we've got to do better about strengthening those bonds. And she would love to see more presidents and chancellors come to our commission meeting and be a part of the community. I just listed off almost a dozen of them today. I want to thank you for pushing us in that direction. She started off working in higher education as well at TVR, University of Tennessee. She served as a sounding board for me when thinking about policies internal to THEC, human resources as well, that being her background and experience. She also does the best job of being the nicest person to tell me when I'm not doing what I could be doing better. And it takes me, after a meeting, I'll walk away and I think, oh, she's saying I should do this better. I got that. And she pushed us this past year as well to open up our communication channels. And there's not a staff member in this organization who's not going to miss you greatly. And I know that Doug Cullum, our internal auditor, is chief among them as well. But Pam, I just want to thank you, and I want to give you a plaque to recognize your service. And she told me earlier that she served on this meeting, this commission for a long time, that she intends to leave as soon as possible. And that's the remainder of this as well. I want to recognize Evan Cope, who couldn't make it today. We'll send him a plaque as well. He started off on the commission right before I started as an intern 11 years ago, 11 and a half years ago. In fact, I sat through his orientation for my own orientation. I got to know him better through conferences that we traveled with together to Lumina in Indianapolis, getting to know him and his family and their background and his interest in higher education. He served as chair for about 6 years, 7 years as well, and dedicated a lot of time to moving this organization forward, and we are going to miss him as well. Dakasha Winton moved on to be the chair of Tennessee State University, and President Johnson is working with her on the daily, I believe, and I think, in fact, my communication with Dakasha Winton has increased since she took on her new board membership. And she always asked in our calls privately, but also publicly, how are these institutions doing? Are they serving the students well? What do they need from us? Always forefront of her mind, those institutions. And then A.C. Wharton, we're going to recognize him at the November commission meeting when we're meeting in West Tennessee. He's been traveling here for board meetings for 38 years, having served on the commission. I wanted to give him a break and a rest, and not drive here. We'll see him in November. I look forward to properly doing so then. And finally, Jay Moser, who did sadly pass away just a couple of months ago. I want to thank my staff for initiating this, where we're able to fly the Tennessee state flag above the Capitol and send that on to his family in recognition of his service to us as well. He will be greatly missed. Unfortunately, his health prevented him from being able to come to commission meetings in his last year, but I got to see him back in April and identify what was his keen interest and higher education, and how can we do better as a commission. And he spoke to similar conversations I've had with Secretary Hargett. How can we help students get to their bachelor degree quicker, faster? What does that look like? He wants to focus on practical education as well. I appreciated that thought and that sentiment and that encouragement and that push, and we will miss him in his service as well. Reflecting on the last year, I started as interim back in September and then permanent in November. We've done a lot as an organization. We have, looking at this commission specifically, onboarded new committees on which we'll have a conversation here in a few moments to see if we can weave those into policy for permanent status. That has done a lot for us as staff as we get those explicit questions in real time from you to help us do better and understand what it is that you want from us. That's been a big change. We've addressed our academic program policies. We've addressed capital outlay as well, to which I discussed yesterday. But address is not past tense. This is going to be a current, ongoing process to make sure that what we do gets better over time. The past commission meeting, we saw an ease and flexibility on the tuition, which had been a change from how things have been going in the last few years with tuition. But what I saw here and what we saw yesterday was an understanding of what it is you need from our team, our staff, to be able to communicate the needs of institutions and students to you to make better decisions in real time. We've had new research and initiative wins. We got an IES, Institute of Education Sciences, which is really hard to get research grant to study our Hope Lottery Scholarship. We started an engagement with Complete College America to identify KPIs and measurements therein. We now have 2 dual enrollment research projects that are lifting off right now, as dual enrollment grants have been increasing across the state. We are entering into a partnership to study and evaluate and step our toes into direct admission practices in Tennessee. And there are others in the hopper that's too soon to talk about right now. And finally, we've navigated through what can best be described as a horrendous FAFSA rollout among our institutions. And I want to take a moment to reflect on this because Tennessee still leads the nation, #1 state in the nation, with regards to FAFSA completion, even given the hard rollout this past year. The good news is, as I mentioned at the last commission meeting, the FAFSA itself is easier. It's more simplified. The technical glitches got in the way this time. But we should all be appreciative of Senator Lamar Alexander's for his multi-decade push to simplify that FAFSA. And we see that now. The completion rates for those who started the FAFSA have been increasing this year. But it's actually getting the FAFSA into the hands of students that have been difficult. Past 2 months, we executed on a $1 million grant from the ECMC Foundation, which came from the federal government. We added on 56 staff, temporary staff, to help put on nearly 170 FAFSA events this summer. Every day, multiple events in partnership with our partnering organizations, Tennessee Achieves, AIRS Foundation, institutions as well. It's been a lot. And we've seen the FAFSA submissions increase substantially this year. In addition to having the FAFSA burnout for our students, I am worried about the FAFSA burnout of our institutions, the financial aid offices, staff on my team, who typically have a different schedule during the summer to focus on different initiatives that pop up. They have been having to focus on getting these FAFSA workshops out this summer. And I'm not going to take the time right now to thank all the staff who've been a part of that, because there's about 17 to 20 staff who deserve special recognition, and that will come. But I've got an eye on them, and I check in with a number of them to make sure, are you okay? Are you good? Because we know this is requiring a lot of you right now. But they stepped up, and I'm appreciative of them doing so. Looking forward on where I'd like for our staff to go with direction and guidance and approval from you all in the future. I talked about this vision in front of you in May. I did not actually put it on the screen for you. This vision comes from multiple conversations with our partners in higher education and the government about what THEC needs to do better. And what I see as our chief role is cultivating a cohesive higher education enterprise which will foster innovative solutions that we are known for as a state to ensure student success, build strong communities, and improve the lives of Tennesseans. This comes with more frequent convenings. I'm meeting with the presidents after this meeting as an example to chart our pathway forward. It comes with working with high schools, stakeholders at the state level. Anyone who's got an interest in higher education, we need to be working collectively on shared goals to move forward as we need to as a state. How do we do this? We will focus on high quality education, high value credentials, being a part of conversations at the state and leading conversations on what quality credentials are in partnership with organizations like SCORE in Tennessee. To be able to recognize that when we have 8 different governing boards, conversations about reverse transfer pipeline, going from TCATs to community colleges to universities, focusing on seamless alignment between those institutions, we need to lead that effort. Be mindful of the investments that we have coming from the state in financial aid and appropriations, and honoring those investments to make sure they are put to good use. And then finally, what are the tools in our toolkit to make this happen? We have one of the most robust data systems in the nation, and we're able to connect into it with the P20 system to labor, Department of Education, and more. The data system that we had allowed us to bring on outcomes-based funding formula 15 years ago as an example. But we have more need to push on this. Just yesterday, we had a conversation about the data we collect from our proprietary institutions. And that's not a part of the student information system that we have at the state. We have robust financial aid data. And we finally have a data strategy council to identify how we can move this and put this all together. Using this data to do better research and be able to respond to needs that come up and questions that come up over time will allow us to put in those innovative policies going forward. You'll hear later today about our research on advised TN, conducted by a former colleague, good friend, Dr. Taylor Odell. Right now, we are seeking to get every single program that we had under an evaluation protocol to see what's working, what's not working, and to lift up those exemplars at THEC, but also across the state. The great work that Tennessee Achieves is doing, the ARIS Foundation, TBR, our universities, other organizations. We want to put a spotlight on what's working well and how can we help expand that across the state. And finally, use all of that to continually innovate and evaluate how the state moves money for higher education, whether it's financial aid, state appropriations, capital facilities. We lead in many ways across the country in how we fund and invest in higher ed, but we need to do so smartly. I don't think that's a word, but we'll say smartly and intelligently. We need to make sure that where the funding goes is going to improve the state. So again, data, exemplars, innovation, and funding. Those are the tools in the toolkit that we need to make sharper and stronger. Thinking through the next year and what's coming down the pike, we have the need to initiate a strategic higher education master plan for the next 10 years. That conversation will involve many stakeholders, chief among them this one right here, as it is your role and responsibility to approve it. As soon as we have an executive committee that is set, we will initiate conversations and get guidance on where to go with that master plan. We have our ideas already. We want to put those in front of you. We'll be doing that September through December, going into next year, convening our master plan review committee that's in statute, discussing with and identifying partners at the state level and institutions as well who are part of that review committee, what they need from higher education, State Board of Education being one of them as well. And then be drafting that master plan for approval by this body in May of next year. In about 14 months from now, I'd like us to get back to the point of convening trustees from across the state, the higher education trustees. We did that back in 2017, back in 2019. We have not done it since. The pandemic kind of threw a wrench in that. And there's a great call for us to do this again from members of this commission, from institution presidents, system presidents as well. And that will be the capstone to our year of master planning. With that, Chairwoman Scarlett, I yield my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gentile. Clearly, we have a lot coming up over the next year.
Yes.
We're going to move to our first item on our agenda, which is the post-secondary education authorization. There's two parts to this agenda item, and without objection, we will vote on them as a set. Dr. Stephanie Bellard-Chase, Senior Director of Post-Secondary State Authorization, will provide an overview of the post-secondary education authorization and then answer any questions. Dr. Bellard-Chase, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. Good morning. So today what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about the initial authorization process, what the steps the institutions have to go through to get to this point for your vote, and just an overview of the students that attend those institutions. Do we want to vote now or at the end, Chairman?
I think probably, let's go ahead. Yeah, why don't you go ahead and present so everyone has an understanding of what you do.
So pursuant to Tennessee Higher Education Authorization Act of 2016, the Tennessee Higher Education Commission is directly responsible for the oversight and operation of degree and non-degree granting accredited and unaccredited institutions that offer a wide variety of academic, career, technical, and trade programs. So basically, the institutions that are authorized by the commission offer everything from truck driving to PhDs and everything in between. So I want to just take a moment to tell you the difference between authorization and accreditation. A lot of people, well, a lot of the schools try to intermingle the terms, but they are quite different. Authorization is approval of a post-secondary educational institution by the commission for that institution to engage in operations that are otherwise prohibited by law. Authorization is for a specified time at a specified locations, and institutions are prohibited from saying that the commission accredits them or endorses them. Authorization is required to legally operate in Tennessee as a post-secondary educational institution unless an exemption applies, and authorization is minimum standards. On the other side, accreditation is a non-governmental peer evaluation of post-secondary educational institutions and programs by private educational associations. And basically, the criteria that the accreditors set determine whether or not institutions or programs are operating at a basic level of quality. Accreditation is voluntary, where authorization is required. Also, you generally have to be authorized 1 or 2 years before you can start the accreditation process. And the commission only recognizes accreditors that are recognized by the U.S. Department of Education. I'll stop there. Are there any questions? Okay. All right. So there's 2 types of authorization in Tennessee. There's regular authorization and there's optional expedited authorization. Regular authorization is for unaccredited and accredited institutions, but only accredited institutions can seek OEA. So this is the process the regular institutions have to go through. They have to attend the initial authorization training. We hold that training quarterly, and the purpose of that training is to help them get through the application, explain the minimum standards to them, and answer any questions that they may have. After they attend the required training, then they can submit an application within a year of the training. If they submit an application and it's incomplete, let's say it's missing financial statements or it's missing a bond, then they get an email letting them know that their application is incomplete and they have 30 days to make it complete. If after 30 days the application is not complete, it is withdrawn. Once we receive an application and it is complete, we do a thorough review, and they must meet the minimum standards for authorization. So a few of the minimum standards are the institutional director. We verify that they meet certain educational or experience qualifications. The instructors have minimum qualifications that they have to meet also. We verify the institutional ownership. For facilities, They have to have at least a year lease from the date of application or show proof of ownership of the building where the training will take place. They have to submit financial statements, which include pro forma and a balance sheet. If they are operating in another state, they must submit their license or authorization in that state. We want to make sure that if they're coming here, they're operating legally from the state where they are. They have to have an institutional surety bond, evidence of a business account, and they also have to have pre-enrollment disclosures. So when a student comes in to a regularly authorized institution, the first document they should receive is called a transferability of credits. It's in the statute. It has to be 16-point font. And basically what it says is that as a student, I realize the credits or contact hours that I get from this institution may not transfer. Therefore, if I know I want to go further my education after this, I'm going to go check with that school first before I enroll in this institution. The next pre-enrollment disclosure is a pre-enrollment checklist where the student has to verify that they've received the catalog, the handbook, they've done a tour of the institution, whether it be in person or virtual, and that they understand the rules and regulations of that institution. And then the enrollment agreement that has the program that they're enrolled in, how much the tuition is, how much the other fees are. It also has the refund and cancellation policy in it. Additionally, regularly authorized institutions have to submit their institutional catalog to us. And some of the policies that have to be in that catalog are the complaint policy, the refund and cancellation policy, and academic progress policies. And then each regularly authorized institution has to submit at least one program registration request. And that is where we work in concert with other state agencies. So if you have a nursing program, a massage therapy program, dental, whatever it may be, we have to receive a letter from that board letting us know that any student that graduates from that program can sit for licensure. Okay, so that is the minimum standards for RA. Once they meet the minimum standards, we do an institutional site visit. So we actually go to the institution, and of course, if it's a heavy equipment program like HVAC, we verify that the equipment is there and it's operable, and that all the other equipment they listed is there. We look at the facilities and make sure it's appropriate for students. After all that is complete, then I make a recommendation to Dr. Gentile that the institution receive provisional authorization. At that point, they can start operating, advertising, etc. Once they get the provisional authorization, then the last step is to come before this body to be ratified. And those are the items on the agenda today. After the institutions are ratified by the commission, then they have one additional training that they must attend, which is the post-initial authorization training. It'll actually be tomorrow. And basically what that does is let them know the expectations per the rules and statute of how to operate their institution as far as advertising, etc. In most instances, this process can take 3 to 6 months. Additionally, every year, the institutions have to recertify to either comply, to show us that they're still complying with the laws and rules. And if an institution does close, then we assist the students with placement. The closures lately, they've taught all the students out before they close. But in the instance that an institution closes and students are still enrolled, excuse me, we do have a mechanism in Tennessee called a tuition guarantee fund, which Treasurer Lillard is the chair of, and it helps make students whole if they are hurt by these institutions. I'll stop there if there aren't any questions.
Any questions?
Is there any differentiation for the process, whether it's credit or not credit, or for-profit or not-for-profit?
No. All institutions are treated the same. Okay, so the next type of authorization is optional expedited authorization. And for this, you have to be accredited, and you have to meet the financial standards of your accreditor, and you have to be in good standing, if you're Title IV eligible, good standing with student aid. All right, so because they are accredited, the purpose of this statute when it was created in 2016 is to give deference to the accreditor. So for OEA, their process is not as stringent. They don't have to go to training. These are usually big universities that are already operating and used to what they need to do for students. So some of the minimum standards for the OEA institutions is that we do verify the institutional ownership. Of course, they have to submit proof of accreditation. On their website, they have to have the cost of attendance, transfer of credit statement, any articulation agreements that they may have with institutions in Tennessee, and their most recent federal student cohort default rates. They also have to have an institutional surety bond, and if they're operating in another state, show proof of authorization or exemption. Also, with these institutions, although we do not approve each single program like we do for regularly authorized institutions, they also have to submit verification from subject matter expert boards, letting us know that their students can be licensed when they finish these programs. Any questions? Okay, so this is just some data about the institutions. Currently, as of July 1st, we had 266 authorized institutions. 199 of them have regular authorization. 56 of those are accredited. 143 are unaccredited. And 149 are for-profit, and 50 are not-for-profit or government. So we have a few other state publics under us, like Troy University in Alabama, University of Nevada in Reno. For the optional expedited authorizations, all of them are accredited, 39 are for-profit, and 28 are not-for-profit. And in fiscal year 23, these institutions served approximately 61,000 students. Just some more data as far as the enrollment. As you see, 67% of the students that enrolled during this fiscal year were over the age of 25, which is considered non-traditional institutions. Non-traditional students. And then over here we have enrollment by authorization. So regularly authorized institutions with no accreditation accounted for 27%. OEA accounted for the most, and then RA institutions that are accredited accounted for 14%. And this is enrollment by gender. The majority of the students were female, and then there's the male. And then as far as race, African Americans 35%, Caucasians 47%, Hispanics 5%, and other was 6%. Lastly, these are the credentials that that students received from these institutions in fiscal year 23. That first line that says no credential awarded, we have some universities that come here and they have summer programs, so those students only receive credit hours, not an actual credential. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Anyone have any questions? Yes.
No question, but I'll make a small comment. So, Dr. Belichase, thank you for the presentation, very helpful. And for our newer commissioners, I will say that the fire hose is now on. So you actually are drinking from the fire hose, if you will. This presentation, I think, is helpful for you because we do vote on these on a regular meeting basis. We take them usually as consent items. So just the explanation that Dr. Belichase has given is what we've asked over the years to help us better understand this process. So hopefully these slide presentation or this slide deck will be made available to you as reference for you for future meetings. So I'll just offer that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Belichase. With that, we do have a couple of things to vote on, just for reference. Sometimes we'll have pages and pages of these authorizations we voted on. So that's why we thought this was good information for you to understand what goes into the consent agenda, but also what all that Dr. Belichase goes through to bring these organizations to us. I will say that one of the questions and conversations we had yesterday had to do with tracking the results and the credentials that are coming from these what do you say, 266 organizations. And making sure that it gets added into our P20 so that we have a broader view of the sorts of high quality credentials we're putting out into our ecosystem when it comes to education. The other question I think that came up yesterday, I think also important, is understanding what are the connections between credits that are received at these sorts of organizations compared to how they get transferred and when they get transferred to any of the other institutions. So whether that is any of the TBR institutions or whether it's the four-year institutions, how easy is that experience for the student and what's that articulation agreement look like? However, let's move forward. So we have 2 items on board here, and with no questions or objections, I'll entertain a motion and a second on this agenda item. Any further discussion? Okay, with no objection, all in favor? Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Bella-Chase. Our next item on the regular calendar is the policy update to our rules of procedure. As you all recall, we've had prior discussions regarding officer terms through meetings of the executive committee as well as our May commission meeting. Today, we are welcoming 5 new members to our commission. We're still looking for our student member. But related to this item, they've not had an opportunity to engage with this as a particular aspect in which impacts the conduct of our business as a board. That being said, I would propose that we discuss and adopt the language that formalizes our committee structure into policy today and hold open discussion for officer terms with our new members so that it'll afford them, for you all, time to understand the information and understand the inputs and how we got to where we are today. As a result, holding that discussion today, staff can then put together an agenda into the appropriate form for consideration for hopefully our November meeting or some later date. So with regard to the next item, we will move on to officer elections. I would suggest we fill our current East Vice Chair vacancy created by Commissioner Winton's appointment to the TSU board and defer the remaining officer decisions to November, which permits officer selections under new protocol. So open it up for any sort of discussion tied to those shifts in direction. Yes, please, Comptroller.
Madam Chair, can you clarify what was Commissioner Winton's position that you're seeking to fill today? She was
Vice Chair of the East.
She was Vice Chair, just for the record. I think it's important contextually that we have some discussion about the future of the officer structure because it might matter unless the person chosen to fill that Vice Chair seat is willing to serve until the next meeting if we change it then. And I'm happy to go either way.
Sure. I do think that it's important for us to fill that East chair. But after that, I would propose that we have a further discussion. If we need to change protocols in November, we can do so.
Thank you.
So I move that we defer the formal action of an officer terms and today adopt the proposed. Oh, I'm sorry, I totally lost my train here. Now we wanted to adopt the committee language. So with that, assuming that you all have had a chance to review the proposed committee language that was provided in attachment 1, I'm looking for a motion to accept those committees. Do we have a second? Any further discussion about the committees? Okay, with that, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. So the next item on our agenda is the election of the THEC officers for the next year. As I previously mentioned, proposed to fill that vacant East Vice Chair position and defer the remainder of the elections until November. I'd like to nominate Commissioner Mike Ragsdale as our East Vice Chair. I'm looking for a second. Any further discussion? Welcome.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
discussion.
yes.
So Commissioner Ragsdale, that'd be quick elevation, nothing you're not used to. If we change the structure of the officer positions at the next meeting, are you willing to serve till next meeting and then something different might happen? Thank you.
Thank you, Comptroller. All in favor? Any objections? Okay, motion carries. Thank you for serving.
Thank you.
So before we move forward, let's do engage in some of these term discussions. And I'll give you the history, because I think that's relevant here. Previously, we had, so the terms as it stands right now, it's one-year terms elected in the July or summer meeting. The previous chair was in role for 7 years, which is a pretty lengthy time. And just for perspective, he was for fishing in Alaska, and we voted him in as the chair again. So he came back and he's like, I need to take a step back. It also happened to be a time when we were going through an executive director search, so there was a lot of things shifting. But getting into this role and getting to know the commission more and listening to what the State Board of Education and other commissions do, the recommendation on the table is that rather than having a one-year term to serve a two-year term, giving the chance for the executive directors to be able to have more time to spend with staff and be more focused and on the mission set forth. So that's where we landed. The recommendation coming out of the last executive session, which was in May, and then further into our May commission meeting, is that the suggestion on the table is that it would be two-year terms, and the person would step off from whether you're east, west, vice chair, secretary, or chair. There's a recommendation on the table right now to have just one two-year term versus two two-year terms, which I think is equally as valuable. I'd love to open it up just for time to talk about the time element, open that up for discussion to see if there's any thoughts on that before we move on to the second part of what was proposed in the executive officers. So any thought on two-year terms versus one two-year term? Yes, Comptroller.
Madam Chair, thank you. And of course, discussions on this have been happening for quite a while. Today is a reinvigoration of THEC. It is no mistake that there are 5 new members here today. And in regard to the chairman's position in particular, I would assert strongly that I think it's best that the chairperson serve 1 2-year term. I do think moving from 1 year to 2 years is a great idea. To follow up on the truth of the history that you talked about, it is true that our previous chairman served 7 years, and as you pointed out so adeptly, one time this committee even reelected him when he was in Alaska and not present. And to an outside audience, that appears rather thoughtless. It certainly happened without deliberation or discussion. And as we look at the makeup of the commission, where it is, for the most part, equally divided between gubernatorial appointments and legislative-oriented appointments, I would believe that 1 2-year term for an officer or for a chairman is good. And if that person is a gubernatorial appointment, for example, that the next chairman 2 years later should be someone of a legislative-oriented appointment to also serve a 2-year term. And I may be getting ahead because I know you said let's talk about the time, but it's important to mention both, that we have chair people who serve 1 2-year term, and then it rotates to someone appointed by the other appointing authority. And I have more in my mind, but I think I'll only mention that right now to stick with your mandate of only talking about the time.
I appreciate the time portion is certainly well said. Any other thoughts in regards to time of term?
Yeah, I concur. I think the 2-year term would be an appropriate place to land rather than two-year terms.
Is that for discussion, or do you want a motion?
This is for discussion. So we'll just continue the discussion today, and we will have the staff come back and provide us the appropriate language for us to vote on in our next meeting. The other topic in regards to going back and forth between legislatively appointed versus gubernatorially appointed, I understand the perspective there. I would really welcome some other perspectives from here as well. My belief is that those people sitting on this commission are surely appointed by whoever is appointing them. But my belief is that you're going to be using what is your best judgment for the mission of this agency versus who has appointed you. That's just my belief. But I would love to hear others' perspectives and thoughts in regards to appointment versus anything else.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just thinking through this, excuse me, thinking through the title, and maybe this is something that THEC staff can help us kind of think through as well. But I think there's a potential. So in the case of a new, so overall, I think the rotation makes sense, and I think there's a potential for a new commission member that, if it's every 2 years, and if board practice is, if best practice is to be a vice chair ahead of being a chair, I know that's maybe just best practice in this, but there's potential that in a 6-year term that someone new alternating between gubernatorial and legislatively appointed, if the best practice is including being a vice chair, would not have the opportunity to serve as a chair, I think, in that 6-year term. So maybe that's something we can just model and take a look at as consideration for that. That's it. Thanks.
Something currently this commission does not practice as vice chair moving into chair. I do think there's a lot of value in that approach. Certainly I've seen with other commissions and other boards, but we've just not taken that practice. I think asking the staff to give us some direction there would be valuable. Any other comments?
And Madam Chair, again, it with Commissioner Van Epps' question there, it has to be mentioned as well that our current procedures and guidelines also require a geographical diversity among the chairs. I'm one that agrees that having a vice chair that then ascends to chair is a good idea. Having perhaps, again, if the chair is a gubernatorial appointment, then the vice chair is a legislative-oriented appointment, and so on and so forth, and you kind of have that procedure. We would probably need practically to amend the rules about having the east, middle, and west geography in the structure if we did that. And Stephen and I have talked about it. It is a jigsaw puzzle, unlike many I have ever seen on all these state boards that I serve on. So I think we would need to be open to that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Comptroller Mumpower is absolutely correct in the rotation between appointments from the executive branch as well as the legislative branch. It's more complicated than that. The change was made just a few years ago where the speakers each get an individual appointment and there is a joint appointment between the speakers. When that came into effect, those appointments, their authority to make those appointments was sequenced to the first ones coming up that naturally terminated the expiration of those terms. So what we have from the speakers is 2 west seats and 1 east seat by virtue of when those came in and when that appointment authority began.
Thank you very much. And of course, I would suggest that the treasurer, the secretary, and I are also legislative appointed officers. And conveniently, I live in the east, the secretary lives in the middle, and the treasurer lives in the west. So we are a utility team from a geography standpoint.
Somehow we've got to come up with a name for that team. I'm sure we have some creative folks here. Well, thank you for the discussion. Any other further comments? Okay, so for next steps, two things for the team here at THEC. One is to be able to come back with the updated language tied to one term for 2 years. And then that person would roll off for at least one term. And that's not just chair, it's chair, executive vice chair, and secretary. And then we will have further understanding from the staff here on what the different scenarios might be. And we can have that further conversation in November.
Madam Chair, is it the intent of the commission that those would be term limited in as a slate of officers or individual officers, meaning if an officer had served as a secretary, for example, for 2 years, they would be eligible to move up to a vice chair?
I read the language that they would be eligible to move into another position, but not in the same position. But I don't know if you all read that differently. Okay.
Chairwoman, it would have to be that way if we're contemplating a practice whereby the vice chair at some point becomes the chair, right?
Wonderful. Thank you all for the discussion. I appreciate it and look forward to this team here coming back with us updated language and scenarios for us to look at in regards to moving people, places, and appointees around. So next up, we have committee appointments. The commission has up to 3 vacancies in the Access, Academics, and Student Success Committee, and up to 3 vacancies on the Finance and Operations Committees, and 2 vacancies in the Joint THEC Audit Committee. I'm going to propose the following appointments to the committees. For the Access, Academics, and Student Success Committee, my recommendation is Commissioner Perry, Commissioner Ragsdale, and Commissioner Wood join that committee. And for Finance and Operations, Commissioner Rader and Commissioner Van Epps. And then for the Audit, Commissioner Perry and Commissioner Rader. With no objections, I would entertain a vote on these appointments as a slate.
So moved. Second.
All right, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Welcome to your committees. The next part in this agenda is we have a transmission of the 2024-25 proposed operating budget. Treasurer David Lillard, Chair of the Finance and Operations Committee, will provide an overview.
Madam Chair, your committee met yesterday on this item and other items that in our committee meeting, and the committee voted to recommend the revised operating budgets pursuant to the presentation that was given by Mr. Van Zonderman of the staff for adoption by the commission.
All right, wonderful.
There may be a need to have a presentation now from him. I don't know, the staff presentation, but.
I don't know that we have any plans to do that. Many of us, I think, called in and listened while you were doing things yesterday.
Okay.
If there are do you have any questions for Treasurer Lillard before moving forward? Okay. I will entertain a motion in a second on this agenda item.
Move to adopt it.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. So next, we have our new academic program from Roane State Community College, the Nuclear Technology Associate of Applied Science. And this is fascinating. We listened to this yesterday. It was great. There is, since there's no current chair of the Access Academics and Student Success Committee, I call on Dr. Kate Brackett to provide an overview of the agenda item and the committee's recommendation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Access, Academics, and Student Success Committee considered one new academic program yesterday, the Nuclear Technology Associate of Applied Science at Roane State Community College. We had 3 representatives from the Tennessee Board of Regents present this program for us. Dr. Jothany Reed, Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs at TBR, Ms. Alicia Fox, Vice Chancellor for Business and Finance at TBR, and President Chris Whaley, who is President of Roane State Community College. They all presented this proposed program and highlighted the strong industry support for the program, including substantial grant funding from industry and federal and state entities. The committee unanimously voted to approve the proposed program. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions about this program? I know we've got 3 people from Roan State Community College, and it's a really interesting program. If you have any questions, I'm sure they'd be happy to answer. Yes?
Not a question, but a comment. We often talk about the importance of working together and building partnerships. And even though this program hasn't even started yet, it's a classic example of building those partnerships between the National Lab and Y12 and others, the Board of Regents and Roan State. So I know that's a much needed program in East Tennessee. It's talked about frequently, and I think it's very consistent with the governor's initiative. So I want to applaud the team for pulling it together.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Since there's no further questions, I'll entertain a motion in a second.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up, we have the Austin P State University Master Plan. The Finance and Operations Committee has reviewed this agenda and provided positive recommendation to the commission. Today we'll be hearing from Dr. Mike Licari, president of Austin P State University, who will introduce Art Lidsky, president of Dober Lidsky Matthey. Dr. Lidsky will then present the master plan and answer any questions. Dr. Licari, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair Scarlett. Good morning. Thank you for inviting us to present Austin P State University's 2024 Campus Master Plan. I'd like to introduce Art Lidsky of Dober Lidsky Matthey. Art's been working with Austin P for the past year to guide the creation of our new master plan. He's worked closely with representatives from every department, every division on campus, including academic affairs, finance administration, physical plant, student affairs, many others. All told, over 100 stakeholders contributed to the comprehensive plan representing our vision for Austin P's future. This master plan represents a really exciting opportunity as we continue to grow over the next 10 years, but Austin P has decided that the best course over this 10-year period is to improve existing square footage by renovating and repurposing our buildings, right-sizing classrooms, redistributing space in existing square footage. Campus Master Plan updates are intended to meet the needs of our students and anticipate enrollment growth through renovation and modernization. We believe this decision makes the best use of our resources as well as the state's. With that, I'd like to introduce Art, who will provide details and walk you through the master plan as approved by our Board of Trustees earlier and by the committee yesterday. Thank you for your consideration.
Good morning. The planning process is pretty straightforward. It's a number of sequential steps. It never happens sequentially, even though it's supposed to happen that way. But there are 3 studies within the master plan that are important to the end result. And one is a campus analysis, where you're looking at the overall campus. Another is the building analysis, where you're looking at individual buildings. And the third is the programmatic analysis. So I'm going to take you through some slides to help you understand where we are and how we wound up with this campus plan. As Mike mentioned, here are a number of different agencies and groups that we met with over the time of the master plan. Sometimes we met individually with individual faculty members. Sometimes we met with their whole departments. It was a good participatory, open process. So, as I mentioned, one of the areas of the master plan is looking at the overall campus. And these 3 diagrams, or these 4 diagrams, show some of that analysis. The map on the upper left-hand side is looking at the predominant building use of the campus. And those red dots or red squares are academic buildings. The yellow squares and yellow dots are residential buildings, and they're basically on the west and east side of the campus. And in the middle is the student life type spaces in green. And above that are recreational and athletic resources. It's a nicely laid out campus. The drawing on the upper right is looking at pedestrian circulation. And if you can see, there's a circle there that has at the a radius that starts at the front door of the library and moves to the outer edge of the circle. That's a 10-minute walk across that circle, which is the time between classes. And so you want to make sure that all of your academic buildings are within that time frame, and they are. It's a nicely laid out campus with the right location, close proximity for academic buildings. On the lower left side, we have circulation pattern. The black lines are city-controlled or city-maintained streets. The light green line or the lime green line are streets that the university maintains. We think, and the university supports that the roads that run through the campus should all be maintained and controlled by the university. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. On the lower right-hand side are the parking spaces on campus. There are about 36 acres of land dedicated to parking. About almost 5,000 parking spaces on campus, which is a little bit greater than the average that we have in our database of about 200 campuses and their parking information. So this is part of the analysis to look at space utilization. And we looked at classrooms, we looked at laboratories, studios, instructional studios, and offices, and so on. And this chart is showing the utilization in the fall of laboratories and studios on campus. There were 87 of those spaces, and they were scheduled 16 hours per week. THEC recommends 20 hours per week. So there's sufficient flexibility in what we have on campus to accommodate growth without adding any additional laboratories at this time. We also looked at classroom utilization, and in the fall there were 83 classrooms that were scheduled, and they were scheduled on average 24 hours per week. THEC recommends 30 hours per week. So again, there is sufficient space and classroom resources to absorb any growth that the university might have in the foreseeable future. The university, after looking at these numbers, have put together a committee to explore better utilization, to explore whether or not there are some rooms that can come offline and be renovated for some other purpose rather than for their current utilization as classrooms or laboratories. And that, I think, is going on in this in the fall. We had a long list of potential projects that the university would like to see move forward. But it was too long a list, and it couldn't have been accomplished in any time frame that's possible, nor could it have been afforded. So we asked them to prioritize their long list, and it came down to this shorter list of spaces and projects that they feel are important to the advancement of the university. There are 5 or 6 of them that came out to be really key and important for a positive impact on attraction and retention of students. It improves academic and student life resources. It helps create a vibrant campus, and they're transformational. So these are an important part of the projects that are listed in their priority list. So I'm going to show you the master plan and how it sort of unfolded. Bear in mind that there is very little new construction. There are just basically 3 additions to buildings. Everything else is renovation. So what's important about that is that they want to reuse the space that they have. It removes or limits the amount of deferred maintenance in these buildings. And so it's an important first step to take advantage of what they have today and make better use of them. So first project is a high priority the military academic building. It brings together 5 seemingly unrelated programs that actually have a relationship in terms of they can share some spaces that are common to each other. And this is a good location for those particular those particular departments: culinary arts, communication, sports, broadcasting, the military, the Institute of National Security, military science, and athletics. So one of the key elements of this campus plan is the health professions building. It is currently under construction. It was based upon the previous master plan, and it has now come to fruition, and it is in the early stages of construction. That building, though, frees up a number of spaces in several other buildings, and these are the buildings that we're capturing to renovate and to provide better resources for the faculty and departments that will use those spaces. So one of the buildings that is freed up is Dunn Hall. It's shown here where the arrow goes from Memorial Health to Dunn Hall. The Health and Human Performance Department will be moving into the Health Professions Building. That's freeing up space in Memorial Hall. So Dunn becomes space for ROTC to move up into Dunn. Memorial Hall then becomes a location for the University College. This is a new college that's been created over the last 6 months or so. It brings together a number of different student-oriented resources, the Student Success Group, the Honors Program, and so on. And this is a great location for them. It's near the Student Union. It's near the dining hall. It's just a great physical location, again, in the center of the campus. Little Govs is a 2-year-old and 5-year-old child educational center. It is a very successful center. They have a waiting list of 300 children, or 300 families, really. It needs an addition. So there's your first addition that we're recommending. It's also related to the College of Education that might want to help create a educational lab as part of that addition and the program that Little Govs has. The library is, what we're looking for there is a reimagination of the library, moving away from book storage and book warehousing to more student-oriented, meeting space, collaboration space, technology, and so on. And there's a new librarian in place that really has some great ideas, and we see that as a renovation project for the library. Ellington Hall is an admin, student-oriented type of building. It has about a dozen or so different student-oriented types of departments, from the admissions to financial aid and so on. It needs to be renovated. The way in which it will be renovated depends upon whether or not it needs to be vacated entirely, whether we can vacate it a wing at a time or a floor at a time. But no matter what, when that renovation starts, we need to find a place to house those people that are where their space is being renovated. And one of those places is this building, Marks Hall. Marks is an older building. It has Middle College in it. Middle College is moving out to the Burt School, freeing up space in Middle College, freeing up space in the Burt School that can be used for staging for the renovation of some of these buildings. In the end, when it's through being used for staging, we think that building should be demolished. It's a poorly configured building. It's been on several different master plans to be demolished. It's still there, still functional, but I think it should go after its useful life is complete. I'm sorry, Harnett Hall is an academic building. Small classrooms, they need to be enlarged. The renovation of the building is important for the academic programs that are within it. So one of the buildings that are freed up, the second and third floor by the Health Professions Building, is Clement Hall, and Criminal Justice and the Department of Communications will move into that vacated space and be renovated for them. The other building is McCord. Nursing is moving out into Health Professions. That will be renovated for psychology and behavioral science and for programs that are geared towards faculty development and their future use. Blunt and Sevier, they are two side-by-side student residences, men's and women's. They need social space. They have an insufficient amount and poorly configured social space, and those buildings need to be renovated. The university feels that it doesn't need doesn't need any additional housing for the foreseeable future, but at some point it might need housing, and we've identified 2 sites where those housing projects might be developed over time, not today. I'm going to talk about circulation through the campus and so on. These intersections that I'm highlighting there are important. 2 of them are along College Avenue, 4 of them are, well, 5 of them are on Marion Street. Marion Street runs right through the campus. It divides the campus from the academic folks and the student housing that's on the southern side of Marion to the recreational and athletic stuff that's on the northern side of Marion, and it's used as a freeway. Fast cars moving. We need to find a way to slow down traffic, and those intersections can be used as devices to slow that traffic down. The stars represent outdoor spaces that the university needs to think about in terms of enhancing and making stronger statements for students. These spaces are useful for socializing, for study, for just active engagement, and we think these are good locations for those. So let me talk a little bit about some road changes that I think are useful to move forward. That red bar is a portion of Henry Street that we think can be closed and can be made pedestrian. There's no reason for that actually to exist any longer. It's dividing the campus and it doesn't need to be there. That yellow bar is on Jackson Alley. It's actually a useful road that goes to parking, but it's a useful pedestrian path as well. And we think that needs to be enhanced as a pedestrian pathway, because if you continue it along, it goes to where the new University College will be. And it's an interesting location for moving people from the east side to the west side, from the academic side of the campus to student life buildings. Marion Street, the street that I think needs to close. We talked about the intersections, but I think from that portion of Marion Street can be closed with consolidation, with discussion with the city. And the university has been in discussion with the city about the possibility of closing it. Their city is not quite ready to do that, but there's no reason why it should not close. The university owns land on both sides. It's really just through the university, and those discussions are continuing. And lastly, this is a map that shows potential land acquisition. The university has been in discussion with various owners and with the city about possibilities for acquiring land. There's no hurry to acquire this land. When it becomes available, if the university wants to purchase it, it should purchase it. But there's no reason for an aggressive movement on any of these pieces of land at this point. But it does protect the edge of the campus, and it protects the interior of the campus. It provides for future flexibility over time. And lastly, this is a chart that shows the dollars for the various projects that I showed you. These are project costs, so it includes construction cost, architects and engineers' fees, includes furniture and equipment, it includes contingencies, and other small fees that are part of the normal process of building a building or renovating a building. It's a total over a 10 or 15 year time period of $120 to $150 million. And that's where we are.
Thank you very much, Mr. Litsky. Do we have any questions for either Dr. Licari or Mr. Litsky? Please.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just a comment, I think, but as I think about master plan and facilities, when I was in the governor's office, I worked on a multi-agency working group that was looking at enhanced school safety. And one of the outcomes was producing a facility design guide for K-12 that looked at safety and security. The document was based off of THEC's best practices for higher ed facility design, safety, security, resilience, and preparedness. And I saw Paul this morning. He was instrumental in that work. It's a great guide, and Paul's an incredible resource. So just want to make that comment that as we think about safety and security of our institutions. Thanks.
Let me just say a couple of things. One is that we included conversations within those discussions with the police, the campus police. The guidelines don't have anything on security that you might want to think about including them at some point. I do know that the university has been upgrading the lighting, upgrading the locks, upgrading the alarm systems and so on. So they're cognizant of that issue, but there's no guideline yet in place to include that in the master planning process.
Chairwoman Scarlett, if I may, and thank you, Commissioner Van Epps, for that comment. For those that don't know, he's referencing Paul Marshall. Paul, if you can please stand. Paul is an architect on our team, and under the other duties as assigned, has been supporting and helping the state navigate security in K-12, and in general, helping with in the aftermath of the bombing downtown back in 2020. He's a great resource. And yet we still have the question, how do we incorporate that into our own policies? Again, there's other duties as assigned, but thank you for helping direct us and perhaps zeroing in on what this could be for higher ed in the future. Thank you, Commissioner.
Any other questions?
Sure. I just want to point out that the committee, in considering this matter yesterday, had a fairly detailed discussion about cost related to the master plan, and Commissioner Stafford pointed out some things about that. And Mr. Litsky had a slide that he showed here about the current cost of those major renovation projects that he had. But I think there's probably a need for commission staff and along with the university to look at how we nuance that out over the years, in terms of anticipated inflation and the possible timing of those projects. We commended the university for their use of renovation wherever possible as opposed to new construction, and they have made great use of that as a method of going forward. So just want to make those points.
I am sad to hear the library is going to be changed, but I like books, so I know that times have changed.
Yep.
The Finance and Operations Committee did provide a positive recommendation to move this forward, so I will accept a motion and a second. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Congratulations. Next, we will hear from Amanda Kaplan, Chief Policy Officer, to provide an overview of the 25-26 internal strategic initiatives and answer any questions.
Good morning, Chairwoman Scarlett and members of the Commission. I'm excited to be here this morning to share with you some of the strategic initiatives that staff have identified for this upcoming budget cycle. At the advisement of this committee, what we were trying to do is really get more information into your hands sooner as we think more about our overall budgeting process and the like. You'll know that this is something typically that's packaged as part of our overall appropriations request, and this will come to you all as a voting item in November. This is ultimately the result of a deliberative process that took place among THEC senior leadership in identifying and prioritizing initiatives for the upcoming year. So what really I'd like to do today is to give you guys a preview of that and answer what questions you all have, ensuring that we give you the right information for the November vote. So with that context, this morning there are going to be 7 initiatives total that I'll be presenting to you all, totaling $14.9 million in recurring funds and $9 million in non-recurring funds. So I'll give a brief intro to the initiative and then open up to answer any questions about that specific one or at the end as well. So the first on our list is the Tennessee Student Assistance Award. This will be about a $12 million recurring request. For those who don't know, our Tennessee Student Assistance Award is our need-based grant for Tennessee's lowest income students. Unlike a lot of our scholarships in the state, this is a state appropriated program. So each year we will ask for appropriations requests for this. This $12 million recurring increase has something to do with the earlier discussion around the FAFSA changes. As many of you may know, the simplification of the FAFSA has also resulted in a new way to measure need, which is the Student Aid Index. This particular request we estimate will serve approximately 6,400 new students in the upcoming year at about an average award of about $1,900. And so what this would be is the first in this three-part series of requests to address maintaining the linkage between the Tennessee Student Assistance Award and Pell Grant eligibility. This is really driving home an overall effort at the agency to simplify the financial aid portfolio that we offer as a state. If a student knows that they're going to get a Pell Grant, this would allow them to know that they're also going to get the state's need-based grant program. So that's the first initiative on the list. The second is for a data scientist, and this would be a full-time position at about $162,000 recurring. You heard earlier, as part of our mission and vision, this effort around utilizing the data resources that we have as a state. There have been conversations about THEC being a prognosticator, better leveraging these resources that we have to both improve programs and improve our work. And so what this position would do would provide some highly technical skills to better evaluate the data structures that we have and help us look ahead to the future. Think of things like projecting need-based aid take-up and the future costs of that. The growing dual enrollment portfolio, when do we get to saturation? Answering some of those key questions that will help us drive our policy work forward. The third initiative on this list is the Veterans Reconnect. It's a $1 million non-recurring request. This has got really 4 parts to it. The first of which is to continue offering the Veterans Reconnect Grant Program, which is a competitive grant program that enacts innovative programs across our institutions. Institutions compete for funds and invest in innovative practices to support student veterans and military-connected students. This aligns with what recently was passed as the VETS Bravo, which is a new tier to the VETS Act that is really designed to recognize best practices that have been occurring for some time across campuses. And as part of that suite, what THEC would like to be able to offer to campuses is professional development opportunities in order to better support those student veterans, as well as an annual conference to bring together these stakeholders to discuss best practices and share. And finally, a marketing campaign to continue to encourage our student veterans and veteran-affiliated families to enroll. The fourth request on this list is a facilities assessment. So yesterday, the Finance and Operations Committee heard a little bit about the updates to the capital outlay request process. What this would do is really give THEC the data necessary to better understand the conditions of facilities across the state. This would involve hiring a consultant to do a full evaluation of the education and general buildings across the state. And then this data would then be imported into our post-secondary Facility Inventory and Survey, PFIS as it's called, to ensure that we have consistent data about all of the buildings across our campuses. 3 other requests on our list. The first is for Navigate Reconnect. So this is a really innovative program led up by Jessica Gibson to help connect Tennesseans in the communities in which they live and support them in their college-going journey. You've heard a presentation, I think a few commission meetings ago now, about the Reentry Reconnect program. This particular request would really look to maintain positions and accommodate the inflationary growth in salary and benefits costs over time. So this really was initiated in 2016 as a line item, but that did not include some of those salary adjustments. And so what this request would do would be to accommodate some of that growth. The other request coming out of our Access and Success Bureau would be the Advise Tennessee request. So this is about a $1.3 million recurring request. Similarly, this would help to maintain program positions and accommodate some of that inflationary growth in salary and benefit costs. Importantly, and this was mentioned before too, around evaluation, both of these programs are undergoing evaluation. In fact, you're going to hear a lot more about Advise Tennessee in this next presentation. But we are actively working with the Boyd Center for Business and Economic Research to do an evaluation in partnership with the Department of Finance and Administration on the Navigate Reconnect program. As mentioned, this is really the first of its kind type program in the country, and so understanding what works, how it works, I think is a really important key to this. And so highlighting that these things would help us to maintain those programs, but that we are constantly thinking about ways to grow and improve. And then finally, the last request on this list is for the Tennessee Achieves Summer Institute. So as many of you all know, Tennessee Achieves and the Ayers Foundations are key partners to us in terms of effectuating the Tennessee Promise program. What this particular request would do would allow for Tennessee Achieves to expand its summer institute to all 13 community colleges across the state. This would be done in close collaboration and partnership with the Board of Regents, and this is modeled off of a pilot that's been operating in Southwest Tennessee Community College since 2017. Functionally, this is a 6-week program that helps to eliminate some of the remediation needs among academically at-risk students. And successful completion of the program not only helps to eliminate that remediation, but also sets students up for a path of success with 9 college credit hours. And so this would allow for that, for in the next year, expanding that to all 13 community colleges. And with that, I will open the floor for any questions you all may have.
What sort of questions do you all have? Yes.
The metrics for the programs that you're proposing are very positive, correct? So do we have a history of success there with these programs?
Yes, I think there are a few things here that we wouldn't have specific pieces for, but you'll hear more about Advise. I can share some of the data with this group that we've received from Tennessee Achieves for the Summer Institute.
And the reason I ask, that was sort of a loaded question because I know it looks positive. I'm on the Tennessee Achieves board, and we like to fund programs that have a really positive outcome and affect the lives of young folks in a very dramatic way, and I think this does. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Yes. Sure.
I would just say I love the data analyst position. I think that's a really important role.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So next on our agenda is actually to hear about Advise Tennessee research. Brett Gibson, Chief Access and Outreach Officer, will introduce Dr. Taylor Odle, Assistant Professor of Educational Policy Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you heard, the next item on your agenda is a presentation of preliminary findings from the research into the outcomes and effectiveness of Advise TN. Since we have so many new members here, Dr. Gentile asked if I would give a brief overview of the program before I introduce our guest. Operated by THEC since 2016, Advise TN is our state-funded college and career advising program. We serve 13,000 students in 27 high schools across the state. Those high schools are selected, they had to be under the college going rate average at the time of selection and before they could qualify for the program. We couldn't select everyone. We had about 60 applicants originally. We serve urban, suburban, and rural areas, and our schools have higher than average percentages of minority and low-income students. At its core, the purpose of Advise Tennessee is to help students realize that they can create the future they want. Each advisor is embedded in the school, working full-time in one school. They have an office on campus. They become an integral part of the school and of the community that they live in and work in. They collaborate with school counselors and other staff, certainly, but they are our employees, so they only engage in college and career advising. They don't get pulled to do bus duty and cafeteria duty and things like that. Those things are important, but we want them to stay on mission, of course. They plug into the ecosystem of resources that we have here at THEC for college access, like our Path to College events, the aforementioned FAFSA frenzy, though this year I think we've called it the FAFSA fiasco. We actually kept it from being a fiasco here in Tennessee, but our statewide communication efforts led by Jesse Green and Suzette Telly and Sarah Morrison, our financial aid workshops led by Jason C., the FAFSA expert in the state, and a suite of career and educational exploration tools on our College for TN website. So they employ all of these resources daily. They meet one-on-one with each junior and senior in their school to help them develop a plan for life after high school. That may be going on to a college or university, a TCAT or a private trade school, apprenticeship, employer-based training, the military, or straight to the workforce. We help them figure out and execute those action steps. You could say we provide the scaffolding a student might need to build their future and to reach their goals. With that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Taylor Odle, Assistant Professor of Educational Policy Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. His work involves the use of quantitative methods and data science techniques to study the economics of education and educational policy with a specific focus on college access and success, college admissions, financial aid, and college advising. He uses field experiments, quasi-experimental evaluations to study what works to improve the students' transitions to and through college. His work has been funded by more foundations than I have time here to list, and he has been featured in Time Magazine, The Hill, Forbes, and The Washington Post. More importantly, he's born and raised right here in Springfield, near Springfield, Tennessee. He's a graduate of UT Knoxville, was a Howard Baker Scholar there, and Vanderbilt, where he interned for Senator Lamar Alexander. Some of you might recognize Dr. Udall, as Stephen mentioned, before going on to earn his Master's of Statistics from the Wharton School and a PhD from the University of Pennsylvania. Taylor was a valued colleague of mine and many others here in this room, as he led fiscal policy and research activities for THEC. His work here on reverse transfer, mentioned earlier, later won the Raymond Vernon Memorial Award for the best paper published in the field of public policy in 2023. We are grateful to Dr. Udall and his colleague, Isabel McMullen, who, for the work on this project and for traveling to come see us today and talk about this. So with that, Taylor.
Thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I'm really excited to talk to you about, again, early evidence that we have on Advise Tennessee. I want to start off by just saying thank you to so many folks, including Director Gentile, Brett, Amanda, and others at the commission. And I'm actually really excited that there are so many new commissioners here today, because I feel like I'm not preaching to the choir. But something that is critically important that I hope you leave today's conversation understanding is that THEC really is what we would call a learning organization. So many institutions, systems, governing bodies, coordinating boards are really afraid of this capital E evaluation. Places are really afraid to look in the mirror, to roll their sleeves up, and to ask hard questions like, is what we're doing actually moving the needle? Are we actually serving students? Are we being good stewards of public dollars? And THEC has had a now decades-long history of really investing in research and finding out how well or if its programs and services are really serving students, and I think this is the continuation of that. And so I hope the Commission is really proud of the leadership that it's provided, but also for its staff in being willing to ask these hard questions. As Director Gentile and Chief Policy Officer Amanda Clefane mentioned earlier, Tennessee has one of the most robust data systems in the country that facilitates a lot of this learning and evaluation. And so I just want to recognize the P20 Data Council, which includes folks from THEC, TDOE, Labor Workforce Development, and TECUA as well, for plugging in to make this possible. And as Brett mentioned also, I have a rock star PhD student in political science, Isabel McMullen here, who has also been a tireless partner in this research. So again, for folks who may be familiar or folks who aren't, I wanted to just reorient you around Advise Tennessee. This is a college access program that started with the class of 2017. It is a state-funded advising program with the kind of streamlined goal to increase the number of Tennesseans enrolling in higher education. As Brett mentioned, this is providing in-house advisors that has now served nearly 14,000 juniors and seniors across 27 high schools in the state. These are not guidance counselors. These are college and career counselors. They are focused on helping students explore post-secondary options and take the steps that they need to take advantage of those options to actually enroll. So they do things like one-on-one college advising, helping people fill out applications. Oh, you need to have an email address. Oh, you need to reset your password. Oh, you need to be sure that you send your transcript. Getting those things done, but also exploring careers, filling out the Tennessee Promise application, filing the FAFSA, completing college visits, or at least scheduling college visits and things like that. Something that is unique, though, is that Advise Tennessee, as a state-supported program, is institution agnostic. The goal is not to drive students to the community colleges. It's not to drive students to the universities or to the DCATs or to publics versus privates. The goal is to identify the best post-secondary pathway for each student's unique individual goal, college and career option. Maybe that is a TCAT and a short-term training program. Maybe it is a 4-year degree and a bachelor's degree. The advisors are identifying what those pathways are for students and helping them be most successful on those pathways. Here is a map that you can see of the current schools and counties that are served by Advise Tennessee. Two things I want to point out. One, Advise Tennessee is currently covering the 4 major metropolitan areas of the state. As you'll see, Knoxville, Memphis, Nashville, and Chattanooga. However, it also reaches across the state into very, what we could call remote or quite rural areas of the state as well. As Brett mentioned, when this program was developed, the schools that were identified were those who had lower than average college going rates. So basically, where are the areas of the state where we could have the most impact that could be the best served by state-supported college advisors? Many of these areas also, as you'll see, these specific high schools that are tagged are categorized as economically depressed with, on average, lower workforce development and educational attainment outcomes and employment for those areas of the state. So what are we doing? And again, I could talk all day about this, but I know that I'm between you and lunch. So what are we doing through this partnership for the very high, broad stroke? We're asking just some really basic questions at the front end. What are the effects of Advise Tennessee on these students' outcomes? Again, remember, this is a college access program. It's trying to get people to explore post-secondary opportunities and follow through on the steps they need to take advantage of those things. So we're going to ask, did Advise Tennessee impact students' college enrollment? Did it get people to enroll in college as the program suggested? We're also going to potentially explore some downstream effects. Is it likely that then these students are more likely to graduate from college? Is it likely that they're more likely to be enrolled because of a small career component that is included in Advise Tennessee? And again, because of Tennessee's remarkable and robust data infrastructure, we're able to ask and answer those questions. As Stephen mentioned, or Director Gentile, mentioned earlier,
Stephen's fine.
Stephen was my TA at Vanderbilt when I was a student there. We go back very long time. We're also trying to understand the secret sauce, right? What does Advise really do well, and what can we ramp up or increase the speed on? And also, for what populations maybe is Advise working especially well or not so well? And so we're going to then ask, do these effects of Advise Tennessee change by gender or race? Do they change by whether or not you're at a Title I or a particularly low-income high school or a more affluent school? And then importantly, especially for state strategy, does it vary for students who are in rural areas of the state? Does it change college going there? And then as THEC thinks about operating the Advise program, are there areas, you can think about this from the private sector like business intelligence. With the robust data that THEC has from CRM or a kind of customer relationship management system, we can actually see every time an advisor talks to a student, what they talk about, what type of interaction they have, etc. So is there a way for us to hone in and identify what is the right practice that exists? How many meetings do advisors need to have with students? What do they need to talk about? And how do they need to meet with them? And so we'll be exploring that as well. I want to just clearly also make a note here on our research partnership. As Director Gentile mentioned and the Chief Policy Officer Amanda Clepane mentioned, the goal for THEC, which I'm super excited to hear about, is to make sure that they are leveraging state resources, but also external resources to study these policies and programs. And I want to give you kind of a view of what we're doing in this partnership. This is not a partnership where we are kind of flying into Nashville, grabbing all of your data, flying away, and then sending you an email to say, hey, thanks, you are doing a good job. Or actually, nope, you should stop doing that. Our partnership really consists of embedding ourselves within this work and understanding what Advise Tennessee looks like on the ground. We were here around Thanksgiving, I think, of last year, rented a van, drove across Middle Tennessee to high schools to meet with advisors, to meet with principals, and more importantly, to meet with Advise TN leadership to really understand what's going on and how this is operating, so that while we're doing our fancy math, we understand what's actually happening and we can ask more nuanced questions. Well, hey, we heard that this advisor at Cheatham County High School said this. Can we explore that in our data to really dig in? And so we're delighted and honored to be a part of a partnership like this. So let's level set. What do we know works previously in other places so that we're informed as we go into this evaluation of Advise Tennessee? Perhaps unsurprisingly, helping people providing college advising to students is helpful for them exploring colleges and undertaking college-going activities, but the devil is truly in the details. What we know is that targeted, intensive, and universal advising is the best kind of a priori strategy. And what this means is don't build a build it and they will come model. Build a model that targets students, for example, these specific high schools, these specific students, and says, hey, you're going to meet with a college advisor and we're going to do these things. Because otherwise, the people who want to take college advising are going to come and do college advising, and they were already likely to succeed. People who don't know they don't need college advising don't come to meet with a college advisor. And so building programs in this way works. And so Tennessee has kind of this checkbox, high quality ingredient already there. Something that's critically important, though, is having advising services and programs that do things rather than tell people about things is going to be most effective. So don't say, hey, you should go to college, or hey, remember you need to file the FAFSA. What high quality interventions, and specifically what Advise Tennessee does, is say, hey, let's fill out the FAFSA. Hey, let's complete your college application, not remember to do this. It's providing application and advising support rather than just information. There are a variety of new initiatives that are popping up that are a little early in the evaluation front, but that actually practice continuity of advising from high school into college. So if you could make the argument that these high school students are particularly in areas that could use this advising support, there's nothing to suggest that that advising support should end once they graduate from high school. There are a variety of things that happen those weeks before you enroll in college, those weeks of when you are a first semester, first year student. And so the idea is developing across the country of, is there a way that we could have some continuity of this person was your advisor for the last 2 years? Are they also checking in with you and providing some familiar services and supports once you're enrolled? Again, part of the level setting, though, is these are college access programs, and so generally, if they are going to be effective, they're going to drive college enrollment. There's going to be very little effect that we should expect on the attainment or even workforce fronts. A lot happens from high school graduation through finishing a bachelor's degree or finishing an associate degree. So we can be hopeful that these things occur, but existing in the literature, they're not likely to be super beneficial beyond the point of what they're ultimately intended and designed to do. And perhaps unsurprisingly, providing folks who have long been deprived of investment and resources, or areas that have long been deprived of investment and resources, programs like Advise Tennessee are likely to be most impactful for those areas. So we should expect Advise Tennessee is going to really matter in, for example, rural communities of the state. And so that's what we should know. Advise Tennessee is remarkably unique because it includes a lot of these check boxes. In the literature, there are a variety of these college-type programs, even though they're called the same thing. So there is one prior study of what I would say is a actually scaled statewide strategy, and that's called Advise Texas. But Advise Texas is designed in a very different way from Advise Tennessee. You might be familiar or have heard the term like the College Advising Corps or AmeriCorps models. What these do is they take high-performing but recent college graduates and they employ them for a year or two and move them into areas. So like think of kind of a Teach for America model, but it's more a public service model. So we take a recent graduate, we put them in high school, they're there for 1 or 2 years, and they're, through the College Advising Corps, providing a lot of these college advising services. That is not what Advise Tennessee does. Advise Tennessee takes full-time professional folks who have, I was honestly extremely surprised and excited to hear who your average Advise Tennessee advisor is. This is a former community college financial aid director. This is someone who's been involved in the Chamber of Commerce for many years. These are trusted adults who have been embedded in the community for a very long time. So when they say, hey, let's do this, let's think about going to a local community college, to TCAT, etc., this is a trusted voice. Also someone who's had a career of work experience who knows how to navigate these spaces. Places like College Advising Corps are also quite decentralized. And so they work on like a kind of a hub and spoke model. They look for an institution, for example, like a regional university, and that's where their hub is for that area. Advise Tennessee is centralized with the Tennessee Higher Ed Commission and operates on this statewide footprint. So initiatives, data, trainings, reporting requirements, etc., and models are uniform and expanded across the state. So what do we know? What do we go into this thinking? Advise Texas had a very rigorous evaluation where they actually experimented, where they're able to assign advisors to schools, and they actually found no overall impacts on college enrollment. For all students generally, there was some suggestive evidence that they saw little increases, about 2 to 3 percentage points for Hispanic students and low-income students, and they were driving those students into community colleges. So as a researcher, my job is never to advocate for anything. I'm looking for evidence, providing it to decision makers, and happy to provide context and go from there. So this is kind of what we should have expected going into thinking about Advise Tennessee. They also found no effects on college applications, persistence, or attainment. But like I said, Advise Tennessee has many more of these what I would call high quality ingredients than what Advise Texas involves. So what do we do? How do we evaluate the effects of Advise Tennessee? Chairman Scarlett mentioned that she's a data nerd, and so I am too, and so you'll have to trust me that there's a lot of nice math going on in the background, but I want to conceptually walk you through what we're really doing here. We have students in these Advise Tennessee schools, and you'll remember that it started with the class of 2017. So what we're able to do is compare students and cohorts of students at those schools before 2017. So same community, same context, same teacher, same principals, et cetera, and look before and after Advise Tennessee existed. At the same time, though, what we can also do is take advantage of the fact that there were many schools in Tennessee who wanted to be Advise Tennessee schools, but there were not enough program resources or staff available to serve everyone across the state. So what we're then going to do is compare Advise Tennessee schools to really other similar schools in the state, even those who had applied to participate in the program. So comparing schools, Advise Tennessee and not in the same year, and comparing those Advise Tennessee schools before and after they had these services. So what do we find? Top line finding, Advise Tennessee significantly raises college enrollment in the state. Advise Tennessee increased the college going rate at these schools by 6%, or 2.9 percentage points. As expected, these effects were in fact larger for Hispanic students, women, and students in rural areas of the state. So if you leave today, and remember not very much, remember that Advise Tennessee is significantly increasing college enrollment in the state causally, no matter how we cut the data. Something that's also important for you to note here is that Advise TN is not driving students into a particular sector. It is institutionally agnostic, and so it is not pushing people into TCAS. It's not pushing people into community colleges. It's not pushing them into universities. We see relatively equal and constant dispersion of college-going patterns before as we do after. So more people are going to colleges. They're still going to universities. They're still going to TCAS. They're still going to community colleges. Advise Tennessee is not moving them into one direction or another. Again, the whole goal is to identify a unique college and career plan for each student, and that's suggestive of what we see here. As I said, we're also going to look at things like baccalaureate attainment or associate degree attainment or credential attainment, as well as employment outcomes. What we see for students who are in Advise Tennessee schools, those who ultimately enroll in college within 1 to 2 years have similar retention and completion rates as their peers across the state. This is actually, in my mind, a positive finding. If you recall, Advise Tennessee was directed at students and schools who are substantially below the average, who have very depressed college and career outcomes already. And so the fact that students in these Advise Tennessee schools are actually on par with their peers in other areas of the state after services, I think is helpful. And again, as I'll talk about at the end, there are options and opportunities for thinking about if we want to leverage Advise Tennessee to support through baccalaureate attainment or through credential attainment, there are strategies to augment the program that can help propel those outcomes forward. For students who ultimately don't enroll in college, so not everyone, again, intends to enroll in college, people go to work directly after high school graduation. For students who are at these Advise Tennessee schools and go to work, they continue to have similar employment outcomes 1 to 2 years after high school graduation as their peers. Something I'll note, again with the advent of Tennessee's remarkable data, we can observe where folks work, their industry of work, their wages, and whether or not they're employed using unemployment insurance records. So the employment rates of high school graduates from these Advise Tennessee and peer schools are actually fairly high. We find over 86% of them in these employment records. And so those at Advise Tennessee schools are similarly employed, working, and earning as those in these non-Advise Tennessee schools. So again, top line finding, we have something that, or the state has something that's substantially increasing college going in the state. And I want to show you what that looks like. So here's a figure that plots the college going rate of each graduating high school cohort from 2010 through 2021. The solid red line are the students at schools that are served by Advise Tennessee. And the dotted line are those similar schools across the state, even the ones that wanted to be Advise Tennessee schools, but ultimately weren't able to. What you'll notice is that the Advise Tennessee schools and non-Advise Tennessee schools are following these very similar outcome trajectories. And in fact, they have completely overlapping college going rates in 2015 and 2016, the 2 years immediately prior to the beginning of Advise Tennessee. What you should notice graphically, though, is this substantial upward shift. The red line is now much higher and is constantly much higher than the dotted line. This is the effect of visual evidence of the effect of Advise Tennessee. Another way of thinking about this is that dotted line is where Advise Tennessee schools would have been if they hadn't had the advent of Advise Tennessee. We should have no reason to think that they wouldn't have been continuing to overlap with that dotted line. And this builds the foundation of finding evidence for the effectiveness or not of Advise Tennessee. But this upward shift is evidence of, again, this meaningful and sustained increase in college enrollment among students in the state. What I'll also mention for you here, I've committed kind of a no-no in the research world of like cutting the axis. So we've zoomed in. So the bottom is 35%, the top is 55%. The statewide college going average is between 55 and 60%. And so we're moved very far down. And so Advise Tennessee is again moving the college going rate for these high schools closer to that top line, which will be the state average. Now let's dig into some more like business intelligence. What types of activities that occur in Advise Tennessee make it especially effective? So now we're just going to look at students in these Advise Tennessee schools and see, okay, how many services, what types of services, etc., seem to be the secret sauce or that are really driving these outcomes. So the college going rate for all students summarized across all of these Advise Tennessee schools is around 45%. People who don't engage in advising have a slightly lower college going rate. About 44% of them immediately enroll in some form of post-secondary education. That's also true for students who only engage with an advisor one time. So meeting with an advisor once doesn't seem to move the needle on the likelihood that the student ultimately enrolls in college. This 44 and 42% are actually not statistically indistinguishable from one another. They're the same. However, perhaps unsurprisingly, but again, critically important to the literature and to the operation of Advise Tennessee, as we start meeting with advisors more, so students who meet with an advisor 2 to 4 times, again, in their senior year, have substantially higher college going rates. We're now up to 48%. And for students in this population who meet with an advisor 4 or more times, are immediately at the state average for college going rate. Students who meet with an advisor 4 or more times have a college going rate of 55%, from an average among this population of 44%. So we need to be consistently engaging with students. Advisors need to be having constant contact with these seniors. How do they need to be meeting with them? Here are the college going rates for students. Again, these numbers should look similar. I just showed them on the last slide. College going rate for people who have the lowest or no form of contact. College going rate is 42%. For students who are in the middle third of the pack, they have a college going rate of 48%. And students who are always talking to that college advisor have a college going rate of 54%. This pattern looks very similar for students who are engaging with counselors virtually, who are doing phone calls, who are sometimes having like hallway conversations, who are receiving emails, etc. That we see this kind of constant gradient. More contact matters, but there doesn't seem to be really a huge movement in this pattern when we think about call, virtual, etc. Where we seem to get the most movement is when students have sustained in-person contact with advisors. For students who have the most contact with advisors at Advise Tennessee schools, and that contact is in person, the average college going rate among that population is 58%, now above statewide average. So constant and sustained in-person contact seems to be how Advise Tennessee is particularly moving the needle for these populations of students. So again, what we find is that Advise Tennessee is significantly increasing college enrollment. Increased college going rate by 6%, And what we can extrapolate if we try and fill in that difference between that dotted line and that solid line is that Advice Tennessee's recovered 1,250 students above and beyond where they would have done had the schools not impacted or had not received Advice Tennessee advising services. So at least 1,250 more students are in Tennessee higher education because of Advice Tennessee. What I want to point out is what I mentioned earlier, Advice Tennessee's effects were larger for Hispanic students, women, and students in rural areas. However, there are no negative effects of Advice Tennessee's when we look across race, gender, rurality, school type. The impacts are still positive for white students. They're still positive for students in affluent areas. The effects are just larger for these populations, especially for populations in rural areas. And what I'll note as a researcher is, remember my prior was, maybe there's not a lot going on here based on what we see from prior evaluations. But these effects actually are among the largest that we see in the literature on college advising programs. And I think that's because of the number of what, again, we'll call these high quality ingredients that Advice Tennessee includes. Professional advisors, sustained advising, scaled statewide strategy. So again, what we find though is at Advice Tennessee, these effects are particularly large when we have increased in-person engagement among this population of students. So what do we do and where can we go from here? Again, not recommending anything as a researcher, but providing evidence from here and in other areas. So there is no evidence that we see that would suggest taking your foot kind of off of the pedal for Advice Tennessee. There are over 140 schools in the state that either don't have a college advisor at all, or that have a suppressed or much lower than average college going rate. So we know for a fact there are a variety of more schools in the state that could benefit from Advice Tennessee services. And what I would advocate for is, again, ensuring the program is designed to target those most likely to benefit students and schools. What we should do, though, as you consider potentially scaling this program or scaling other strategies, is, again, a focus on in-person meetings, and that could be accomplished through lower student-to-advisor ratios. So more staff, particularly in larger schools or schools with higher senior bodies. As I mentioned earlier, if there is an idea or an interest in expanding these effects and following them through baccalaureate attainment or associate degree attainment or credential attainment, there is early evidence that might suggest that having a continuity model where an advisor follows these students into their first semester of college, for example, could be impactful for retention and completion rates, or moving the services that are provided earlier in a career. So targeting a student in their junior and senior year is important, and we see that it is impactful. But sometimes, if you don't meet with an advisor until your senior year, things can often feel, quote unquote, like too late, right? I've already taken the classes. I haven't done any clubs. I haven't filed the FAFSA. I haven't done something in time. There is substantial evidence that suggests that having earlier engagement with the higher education enterprise from students could be impactful. So what if every 9th grader had an initial college advising appointment or college or career exploration activity? There are also a variety of additional high-impact practices that Advise could consider, like summer follow-ups after graduation. Hey, did you enroll? Did you pay your enrollment deposit? Or do you have housing, etc.? Or engaging in cohort-style college visits. So let's get everybody from Cheatham County and take them to Austin Peay, for example, to do an on-campus tour, maybe visit a class, etc. So what are we doing next? This research is still very much underway, and what we're going to do is see if Advice Tennessee has impacts on other margins, and also, again, to provide some of that business intelligence to the state of what are the activities that these advisors engage in that seems to really move the needle. Are we getting increased FAFSA filing rates because these advisors are helping students file the FAFSA? Are they more likely to fill the Tennessee Promise application because they engage with an advisor in these schools? And we're really excited to share these findings. As Brett mentioned, we engaged in a partnership with THEC last year around reverse transfer to study that program. And I think THEC took those findings and have made the program in the state a lot better. And it was named the #1 paper in public policy published in 2023. And so I don't know if there's going to be any like 2-time winners, but we're going to go for that with an Advice Tennessee type paper. But we're excited to share these findings, not only with you, but with academics and importantly with places in other areas, because they have these advising programs that aren't working. And like so many other things in Tennessee, there are probably a lot of lessons to be learned here if they want to increase those effects. So again, thank you so much for this partnership and also for the invitation to join you today.
Thanks so much, Dr. Odell. Any questions? We're given a lot of information, but love any questions or comments, please. Yes, Barney.
First, thank you again for the research and for the presentation. Very compelling. I guess my question really is more for my constitutional officer colleagues. What more can we do to help convince the state that more funding is needed to put this program into other schools that might have additional success?
May I? Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, as usual, Commissioner Stafford, you're a few minutes ahead of me. One of the thoughts I was thinking about while he was making this presentation, I think it'd be very helpful for the education committees to see this information and actually, whether we do it virtually or in person, for Dr. Odell to present this information to them and possibly include leadership of the finance committees as well. I certainly think that would go a long way in helping make them aware of how we can move the needle in Tennessee.
Anything else for Dr. Odell?
I'm not a constitutional officer, but I know at least a couple members of the finance committees, and seeing Dr. Tiding's chart that showed the wages, if you kind of backtrack to the beginning of this meeting, and then adding that data into we now know how many new students have gone in that wouldn't have gone in otherwise, and getting an understanding of what that economic impact would be would probably help encourage some of that.
Sounds like Yakko.
If I just take a moment of personal privilege here, I'm going to recognize Troy Grant, who's in the audience, who's going on to TBR, is at AIRS Foundation right now, who's got a really successful embedded program too. But he was on the ground floor to get the scaffolding. By the way, Brett said scaffolding earlier. That's his favorite word, Troy's is. You got the scaffolding for this in place with Dr. Sharika Nelms over time, and we're itching for such an evaluation for some time. And I also want to recognize in the audience our director now, Sarah Ligas, who's in the room, and also Susan White representing the East, and Tiffany Rice representing the West as well, who's in the audience here today. But this is what good work can yield, and whether it's successful in the future requires evaluation like this. I want to thank Dr. Taylor Odell, who's been, if I can claim a little bit of just pride of my career to see him become one of the leading scholars in the country for higher education research. So thank you very much for coming in today for this. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Dr. Odell.
Thank you.
So next up on the agenda, we have other business. Does anyone have any other business to discuss? No other business? Okay. Well, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you all.